Yes, of course, I woke up to hear the news about riots in Portland. We're on now night 76. And lo and behold, they return to the Justice Center and the federal courthouse. I actually have the tweet just right here from the Portland police where they said, those at the federal courthouse building and the Justice Center. Now here's what's funny. They tried claiming in the media and the leftist pundits they tried claiming that the violence was caused by the feds. And now the feds have withdrawn. And you probably heard me call them out several times because the violence never stopped. The feds never withdrew. And once again, so let me be fair. The violence outside the federal courthouse simmered a little bit. There was still violence, people getting beat up, fires being set. But federal, DHS police weren't coming out and actually engaging with the rioters. The rioters actually started going to residential neighborhoods, harassing locals and rioting out there, walking around with bullhorns, screaming like no justice, no sleep for people. And because of that, it was technically the truth, the best kind of the truth, when they said that it was peaceful outside the courthouse. Okay, fine. Peaceful in the sense that fires and people getting beaten up is peaceful only because they're not being arrested. Sure, whatever. Well, they're back. They're at the courthouse again. We're back to where things were before the DHS came in. You see, on night 39 of the riots is when DHS finally said, okay, we're going to have some extra, police officers coming in to help quell the violence. Here's what I love about this, though. I could come here and I could say to you all, hey, there's another riot. Oh, and they threw rocks and stuff. But as I'm reading this article from KOIN6, Coin, I noticed something. Sociologists to protesters. What are you demanding? Yeah, nobody knows. Nobody knows. And that's actually a more interesting article, in my opinion. They say, as the nightly events continue, many wonder what protesters hope to gain. Many African Americans are wondering why certain people are still out protesting on our behalf when even we are saying, what are you demanding? Said Dr. Shirley Jackson, a professor of Black Studies at Portland State University. We asked for certain things. We are getting those things. And what we would really like to do is see those things being implemented, but there is concern the intention is being drawn away from the movement. Dr. Randy Blazik, a sociologist and chair of the Oregon Coalition Against Hate, told Coin6 News that since federal officers left, it appears protesters have been largely policing themselves, putting out fires started by others and quell violent behavior. But where do we go from here? You see, that is a lie. I think they're saying it because their goal is to propagandize. And when you have actual members of the Black community and the NAACP who have been speaking out against these Black Lives Matter riots, you'll need some of the ideologues to come out and be like, well, they're mostly peaceful. I love it. Check this out. How can we quite literally have this article from just the other day at 3:54 p.m. saying they're mostly peaceful when we have 76 nights of riots? Okay, 76 nights of riots. That means yesterday, when this guy was claiming it's now mostly peaceful, they literally just had a riot the night before. Like the police declared it's a riot. Not, you know what, man? Portland is in the gutter because they're going to release people even if these people assault an officer, there is a good chance they will be released. Okay. We should probably read a bit about the riots from last night, but I want to highlight this. Okay. Antifa website cited in conservative media attack on Biden is linked to, wait for it, Russia. I don't care about this, but for those that aren't familiar, Antifa.com was redirecting to Joe Biden's website or something like that. And they're claiming it was linked to Russia because it was registered in Russia or something, then switched to Panama. I don't care. What's interesting, however, is that the media acts like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris shouldn't denounce Antifa. Because that was the question that was asked. Should Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, should they publicly denounce the Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization? Yahoo says it's not clear why she thought it raised that question, though, since there is no evidence that the Biden campaign has anything to do with Antifa.com or vice versa. Instead, the phenomenon cited by Rioting had a clear link to Russia. Okay, this is all dumb. Listen, Multnomah County DA's office won't prosecute many arrested in Portland, and they mention that they're even going to, look at this, prosecutors will scrutinize the cases of protesters accused of resisting arrest or assaulting public safety officer and consider the chaos of the environment. Yeah. We'll read about the riot, but here's the gist of what I want to get to before we dive into everything, right? Many on the left, many of these pundits have been lying nonstop, saying it's all been peaceful since the feds left. And that's a good reason why Joe Biden should denounce Antifa. But more importantly, he should, because it's not really Antifa. The people that are going out and rioting are Black Lives Matter. That's what they're yelling. There's a video where they're out in front of a building and they're screaming, we're going to burn your building down. And then they yell Black Lives Matter. So yes, that's why people are sending Antifa Biden's way. Now, conservatives seem to think, they say, like, not all of them, Antifa is the militant wing of the Democratic Party and all this stuff. Let's be clear, man. The far leftists, they hate Joe Biden and they hate Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris and Biden have absolutely been adopting radical, more progressive policies. But yes, some are very radical relative to where the U.S. has been. But they're not far left enough. Some of the things they do are far left, especially from a conservative perspective. But to the actual far left, Joe Biden is not nearly enough. Neither is Kamala Harris. So they don't like him. They don't want to vote for him. They don't want to support him. But there are a lot of people who make it seem like, Antifa is, part of the Democratic Party. No. They absolutely don't like, Joe Biden. However, they believed they could use Joe Biden as, he would sway on issues. The only problem for them now is Kamala Harris won't. So here's the most important part. The issue about denouncing Antifa has to do more with Black Lives Matter. Because Joe Biden does, the Democratic Party does support this top-down organization. And let me tell you, when the looting happened in Chicago, widespread, windows being smashed, just stuff being stolen, gunshots, people shooting at cops, security guard gets shot, put in critical condition. When all that went down, the next day, the official Black Lives Matter chapter came out and said they didn't care about the looting. They wanted the looters released and that looting was reparations. That was Black Lives Matter. So my question then would be more aptly, here's what I would ask of the president or Biden. I would say to Biden, we just saw widespread looting throughout Chicago, vandalism and destruction. People were shooting guns. A security guard was shot and put in critical condition. 13 or 19, depending on your source, officers were seriously injured. The next day, Black Lives Matter Chicago came out in absolute support of these looters, demanding their release and said looting is their right. Looting is reparations. After seeing something like this, would you still support the Black Lives Matter movement? And will you condemn what Black Lives Matter Chicago said? That would be my question. Will that question ever be asked? I really doubt it. Because as much as I can respect, look, the journalists who actually ask questions at the press briefings of the president, I got no problem with. By all means, ask away. The grandstanders, not a fan of. Softball questions, I find, I roll my eyes at. So, if OAN's going to lob a softball at Trump to give him a chance to make his point, not a big fan. But it's not the big a deal. Softballs, they happen. We know the biases. The bigger issue for me is, will anyone actually say what I just said? Because otherwise you just see this. Night 76, riot, tear gas, arrest in downtown Portland. I think as much as I don't really care to basically say the same things over and over again, and I'm sure most of you are probably over it, we should still at least get an understanding of a little bit of what happened with the riots. And then there's actually a little bit more because I want to talk to you about this. Check this out. This is where it gets more serious. Bend, Oregon activists block ICE bus, prompting federal agents' response. The protests spanned hours as 2 unmarked ICE buses were blocked by protesters. Okay, they're not protesters. They're extremists, insurrectionists, whatever. This is ICE taking away, I guess we'll get into it specifically because I don't want to assert, crimes committed by an individual without proper context. The fact is, ICE is trying to transport people within the legal system. And now we're seeing direct obstruction of ICE, of, transportation of illegal immigrants. What we see over in Portland is chaos and rioting, and it's negatively impacting local residents. And it's important to call these things out. They show up and they riot in front of the federal courthouse and they cause all this damage and destruction. And that is interfering with law enforcement, but it's mostly at night. Now they're actually getting emboldened and they're standing in front of these vehicles. They're blocking them. So they're literally obstructing justice. I mean justice in the legal sense. Well, so anyway, look, I'll chill on the rant. Let's read and see a little bit of what happened because I did show you the Portland police are straight up saying they're outside the courthouse and all this stuff. Here's the news, whether we can trust it, and I'll make sure to fact check in real time. They say, Police declared a riot late Wednesday night after hundreds of demonstrators returned to downtown Portland after more than a week in which the biggest events were held in other parts of the city. As many as 300 people had gathered in Chapman and Lonsdale Square Park by about 9:30 p.m. Within an hour and a half, a riot was declared after fires were set near the federal courthouse and items like fireworks and rocks were thrown at officers. Portland police say one officer's hand was severely hurt and several others suffered minor injuries. Multiple arrests were made by the night's end. More information on those arrests is forthcoming. Police say members of the group began launching fireworks at the fence surrounding the courthouse by 10:30 p.m., while some individuals threw an unknown foreign substance at the front door of the PPB Central Precinct. So it looks like this may have been the worst night of rioting we've seen yet. Extreme acts, severe injury of an officer on his hand. They're attacking the federal courthouse as well as the Justice Center and a Portland precinct, the Central Precinct. They say, despite the fireworks, the gathering remained largely quiet until about 11 p.m. when a couple of small fires were lit near the federal courthouse. A fake pig head and Trump flag were set ablaze in the middle of Southwest 3rd Avenue. More fireworks and other objects were thrown over the fence surrounding the courthouse. Meanwhile, private vehicles blocked traffic from entering the protest area. Less than half an hour later, police warned the crowd over a speaker that criminal activity was occurring near the courthouse and needed to stop. Portland police declared the gathering an unlawful assembly at 11:30 p.m., cautioning that those who failed to leave would be subject to the use of tear gas, crowd control agents, or other impact weapons. They said it was a riot just minutes before midnight. Despite the riot declaration, protesters began moving toward the Justice Center and some threw fireworks and eggs at officers. Large numbers of Oregon State Police troopers, Multnomah County Sheriff's Office deputies, and Portland police officers then took to the streets to disperse the crowds, making arrests and deploying tear gas as they moved. Coin 6 News witnessed authorities pepper spray at least one person. Police say around 12:45 a.m., about 100 people remained and were moving back to the Justice Center. Those protesters? Are you kidding me, Coin? It's clearly a riot at this point. The rioters continued to throw items while officers dispersed the crowd once again. Some members of the group then moved near the Central Precinct, where one person was arrested after vandalizing a police car. The vast majority of the demonstrators had dispersed by 2:30 a.m. The vast majority of the riots. Let me tell you why it was so important to have the feds involved. And it's this story I've highlighted before, okay? This is why I believe we need, I'm sorry, man. At this point, I think Trump has more than enough, evidence, I suppose, to say, you lied. It was not the DHS causing this. Because without federal law enforcement, you have Portland police, Oregon State police, and Multnomah County sheriffs desperately trying to stop riots at multiple law enforcement buildings. Or the court building. They didn't stop. And I'll tell you what, when they say straight up, prosecutors will scrutinize the cases of protesters accused of resisting arrest or assaulting a public safety officer and consider, quote, the chaos of a protesting environment, especially after tear gas or other less lethal munitions have been deployed against community members en masse, the district attorney's office said in a news release. To put it mildly, if a rioter is out setting fires and attacking people and an officer says it's time to arrest them, and the far left tries to pull off what they call a de-arrest, where they actually start grabbing and pulling and hitting the cops. Oh, you know what? It's just the chaos of a protesting environment. And they're going to release these people. They have straight up said Multnomah County DA's office won't prosecute many arrested in Portland protests. That's how they frame it. I'm sorry, man. The riots have been ongoing. You know what happened in New York? Some dude is accused. I say that and I take it seriously. He's innocent until proven guilty. Of trying to cut the brake lines of an NYPD vehicle. He got arrested. The courts in New York cut him loose almost immediately, my understanding, with no bail or bond. That's New York for you. The feds swooped in immediately and detained him, and now he's facing federal charges. It's the importance of the federal government, and it's what scares me about a Joe Biden presidency. Donald Trump sent in, it's called PACT. I forgot what it stands for, but it's CBP, ICE, Federal Protective Services, to bolster U.S. Marshals. They were the ones defending the federal courthouse. I don't like the conflict, but I'm not stupid enough to blame the feds for being attacked simply because federal officers have better gear and riot control munitions doesn't make it their fault they are being attacked. If Antifa, the far left, if Black Lives Matter simply stopped setting fires and attacking the building, none of this would have been happening, right? Well, they came back. Without the feds making arrests, these people will continue to just be released and everything will go crazy. So that's it. Trump's DHS was right to be down there. They were in a defensive position. They were arresting people, and the media smeared and lied about everything that was happening. And that's a big risk for Trump. They're going to try and play that Trump secret police. Notice, where are the stories about the secret police attacking peaceful protesters? Nowhere to be found. So right now, all of these different departments are banding together to try and shut down what is becoming more widespread, more violent, these riots, and they're getting released even when they assault officers. And that's why I find it hilarious when we have these many African Americans wondering why they're out protesting. Well, they're rioting and they're doing it for no real reason. And it only it makes the left look really bad. That's the problem. And that's why I said Biden needs to denounce this. To be fair, Biden said specifically that the violent people should be found and arrested and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And I give him the respect for saying that he deserves for saying that. I don't like the man. I think he's crooked. I think he's establishment. But credit where credit is due based on individual actions. If he comes out and says, these people should be arrested, I'll say, good. It sets an example for everyone else to call this out. Now, here's where it gets worse. And this is why you've got to take a hard stand against these people. Bend, Oregon activists block ICE bus, prompting federal agents' response. ICE is a federal agency. These people are emboldened, and boy, are they going to get a reckoning with a swift boot. The federal law enforcement agencies, you do not mess around with. They are very different. My understanding is that the prosecution rate, like the successful conviction rate for federal prosecutions, is like 99%, like some ridiculously high number. If you interfere with the feds, they've got you, okay? And I've seen activist organizations, like actual nonprofits that do, nonviolent civil disobedience, warn protesters and activists about the dangers of engaging in federal protest. Like even in Washington, D.C., you want to do something overtly illegal in D.C., you will get in trouble. We did see at the inauguration of Trump back in 2017 about, 250 so far left rioters setting fires, breaking windows, smashing things. Most of them got away with it. They did. The feds tried getting them on conspiracy charges because they all wear black and they act in concert. And it didn't fly. It's really, really hard to prove. And I can respect the legal system for, saying we cannot prove that simply because someone was wearing, all black, that they did do anything illegal. We can't criminalize simply because somebody was there with this, outfit on. And it is unfortunate. However, we're starting to see some jurisdictions roll with gang affiliation enforcement. So they're considering if you're part of an organization and you go out and you wear the same clothes, you're a gang. And now you're facing life for real. No joke. So this is where it becomes important to make the distinction. It's not Antifa. Antifa is a loose, a loose group of a bunch of individual cells groups from various parts of the country. The individual groups themselves you can call a gang, and I think that's relatively fair. I'm not sure how I feel about these laws of escalation and intent, where they're basically like it's already a crime, but it's more of a crime because you did something in a certain way. But I think gang laws aren't the worst of it. So if you start a group and you call it the Happy City Antifa or whatever, and you have an emblem and you take concerted action and you engage in certain activities, it's gang related, especially if you're attacking, shaking people down. So check it out. In Louisville, Kentucky, they're going business to business. They're threatening businesses and demanding cash. And they did it, and one business said no, so they smashed a flower pot and said, we're going to defame you, we're going to block your business, we're going to effectively shut you down unless you give us what we want. And they wanted 1.5% of net revenue sales donated, or they had to buy certain products from black-owned businesses. Sounds like literal gangster racketeering, like from back in the day. And they called it mafia tactics. This is when gang laws probably come into play. So Black Lives Matter is a national top-down organization with individual chapters. And most of them have, like, they recognize the National Black Lives Matter movement organization, which takes in money. It takes donations. It goes through Act Blue, which is another thing, you know, in and of itself. They loot. They defend the looting. They get violent. It's about time the feds actually came in and started treating this like what it is. It's a racket. I mean, think about it. They say things like, look, they're going around, they're smashing up windows, they're getting violent. There's no real demand. They're not saying, here's the change we want. Many of them are calling for defunding the police, but many of, like 129 or something departments have already been slowly defunded. So what I see right now is, let's be completely objective about this. What is, at this point, Black Lives Matter? It is a national organization with various groups that march through the streets in their name with defense from their chapters. In fact, some of these events with the far left violence have been organized specifically by Black Lives Matter. They have made demands for cash. They request cash, whether you can call it a request. They attack and target businesses. They get violent. 76 nights. This sounds to me like straight up high level mafia stuff. And they're political. So some people would call it terror. I look back to how the old gangster stuff, you know, was in Chicago. I'm not a big history buff on Chicago's gangster history or anything like that. But politics plays a role. You pressure politicians to defend you, to not pass laws that would hurt you, to support you, to advocate for money to go to your organization. They say it's a nonprofit. They take in cash. Then they have street level groups in their name smashing up windows. But guess what? If you put Black Lives Matter flyers in your window, they'll leave you alone. And that's the name of the game. This is something beyond just a gang or a mob. It's got an ideological bent to it. It's fanaticism. It's zealotry. And we're going to keep seeing it. So anyway, the gist of it. I get it. I don't know how many, look, I can wake up every day and say, oh, riots again in Portland. At this point, it's just safe to assume Portland is a riot. But I saw the thing about, the Democrats denouncing Antifa. And yes, they absolutely should. Will they? No. But what about denouncing Black Lives Matter? I believe they should as well. And I mean it, because it's not what most people think it is. And there's a lot of victims of the violent crime coming from these groups. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.